Khashoggi fiancé, Saudi Arabia can get away with whatever it wants. The fiancé of Jamal Khashoggi has said the world has failed to hold Saudi Arabia to account over the journalist's murder and the kingdom is being encouraged to do whatever it wants.
Here's a summary of the article.
The fiancé of Jamal Khashoggi has said the world has failed to hold Saudi Arabia to account over the journalist's murder and the kingdom is being encouraged to do whatever it wants. Hatice Cengiz, a Turkish scholar and activist, said the lack of meaningful global sanctions against Saudi Arabia more than a year after Khashoggi's brutal killing inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, had sent a message that the kingdom can do what it wants, and then get away with it. Cengiz spoke to The Guardian in Washington, where she is to attend Tuesday's State of the Union address as a guest of the Democratic Congressman Jerry Connolly, who has called for a halt in arms sales to Saudi Arabia and the possible closure of Saudi diplomatic facilities in the U.S. In the wide-ranging interview, the 37-year-old spoke of her life since 2 October 2018, when Khashoggi, a Washington Post journalist, who had entered the Saudi consulate to retrieve documents he needed for their marriage, failed to emerge, leaving her waiting outside. An investigation into the murder by a UN Special Rapporteur for Extrajudicial Killings, Agnes Kalamar, later established that Khashoggi had been killed by a Saudi murder squad in what she described as a premeditated, state-sanctioned extrajudicial killing. The Guardian reported last week that U.S. authorities urged British counterparts to keep a close eye on Cengiz in London last summer, because of their belief that Saudi Arabia had the ambition and intention to monitor Cengiz in the UK. Cengiz said she was never alerted to the threat but that her fears for her safety have been a constant preoccupation. Omar Abdulaziz, a dissident and close associate of Khashoggi's in Canada, has alleged in an Israeli lawsuit that technology owned by the Israeli firm NSO Group was used to hack into his phone on behalf of Saudi Arabia. In December, prosecutors in Saudi Arabia announced that 5 men were sentenced to death, and another 3 would face time in prison, for their roles in Khashoggi's murder.
This post received a score of 66,863, with an upvote ratio of 91%. Here are the top comments in response to this article.
I mean, she's not wrong, definitely not wrong. And Khashoggi's death is just a small thing they've done lately. They literally funded the worst terrorist attack in US history, and were still doing business with them. Fuck the KSA royals and theocracy. Edit. There's no concrete proof of Saudis funding 9/11. But if you shook a magic 8-ball, all signs would point to the KSA.
They've empowered religious fundamentalists to help them keep hold of power, but those fundamentalists aren't ruling. Evidence for this can be seen by how MBS has imprisoned several religious scholars over their disagreement with MBS's policies, and that none of the Saudi royals are religious scholars. If the royalty were scholars, it could be considered a theocracy. If it were a theocracy, the royal family wouldn't be executing religious scholars for their beliefs, political views.
Greater than if it were a theocracy, the royal family wouldn't be executing religious scholars for their beliefs, political views. They certainly would, if they were the wrong religious scholars.
Oh yeah, undoubtedly, and they have done so in the past, most notably with Shiite scholars. But the scholars they've most recently executed are of the same SECF school of thought as the royal family supports.
People here are very uneducated about the Middle East. I do not know if it is even worth discussing anything here. They know nothing about how the Saudi kingdom was formed and have no idea about the internal power struggles in it. They don't know about things like how the Grand Mosque seizure and Iranian Revolution forced KSA to adhere to Wahhabist reform demands.
Sue, do you have any materials you could link for us to study?
That is good brief explanation. I was more exposed to Saudi Arabia and all the Middle East growing up because my dad worked in the region, so I spent many years living there. It is really hard to describe the internal structure of Saudi and the Middle East. They are not really nation-states, but more factions that are divided by nation-states. The failure to understand this is what the West gets wrong. Most people don't care, they just go theocracy, Islam, US oil, petrodollar, or some dumb shit.
I'll take things we've known since 9/11.
I'll take things we've known since the First Kingdom was established, and all bow down to the will of the rich and powerful.
Now you're going back to all of known history. Time to admit what humans are.
A fucking tragic comedy.
At least we have pizza.
And dairy intolerance, and wheat. So tomato sauce, really.
This video was automatically created by Reddit to speech. The article and comments in this video were selected from Reddit according to their upvotes, and any paraphrasing was performed by smmry.com, without any human intervention.